Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy to have our part 2 session of this panel discussion in the realm of diseases. And I am very excited to have 3 people back. Well, actually 2, but one of them are going to share something in writing because she couldn't be here with us, which is Swati Rohatgi, who we'll see next week. She's going to share her cooking session around cancer, like what we can do with Ayurvedic cooking and what to look out for. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Swati, who's taking some self-care today, which is really, really important, which we can dive in towards the end of this conversation. Well, first and foremost, I want to invite Diana and Amanda here with me today, who've been talking with me after last week's discussion. And we just talked about so many different things afterwards and how we've been just deepening our conversation and how diseases really show up in our lives. And one thing that I just noticed in the past few days for myself is how easily we want to get away from discomfort. And I mean, that kind of gets into the themes that we want to talk about today, which is numbing and people pleasing. They might be a little far away from each other, you might think, but they are very related in ways because we are numbing ourselves because we want to please other ones and vice versa. And so we'll see how this all evolves and how my lovely 2 panelists will be sharing their perspective on how they'd experienced numbing, how they witness it maybe in other people, and also how people pleasing is showing up in their lives. Beginning our conversation with discomfort, I learned so much in the last, let's say, 48 hours about how different we are as human beings. Sometimes we can be outgoing and loud and very, extrovert in one way. But when it comes to emotions, we can be very different. We can be the total opposite. We can be disassociating ourselves from our emotions. We might be not able to express our emotions that other people can relate to. And what happened for me is that I was misled because I was like, oh, I thought if someone is outgoing, outspoken, they will be able to express themselves emotionally. And I discovered that that is not the case. And what I also discovered is that when we are resisting how we're feeling, when we are holding back on how we're feeling, we are trying to get away from discomfort. I've been there yesterday. I was on a hot seat pretty much. I was being mentioned things that I've done in a session that wasn't appropriate, apparently was crossing many boundaries. And yeah, that's what happened, right? So it was very uncomfortable for me to be sitting in that position, receiving feedback and information how other people are going through experiences that I am expressing. And so I was just reflecting on this today and asking myself, what is it that makes me feel uncomfortable? How does it show up and how do I deal with them? So before we get into our numbing and people pleasing, I would like to hear from my 2 panelists. How do you deal with discomfort? Are you someone that is welcoming them? Are you someone that is more likely to just take a moment, reflect on them? How does it show up in your life?
Well, I can start then. It was discomfort. No, I'm kidding. No, so thank you for letting us be here. Well, it's actually different depending on how I feel and how aware I am of my behavior. Sometimes, for example, when my kids are angry, I can, because I had a problem with anger, I for many years I was holding back my anger, talking about holding back feelings and then ignoring my body signals and trying to be the good girl. So discomfort in those cases, then I went to numbing in watching TV or surfing on internet, looking for something new and just filling my head with some things, trying to learn something new all the time. But it was also a behavior, escaping and numbing behavior, or eating something, especially sweets. That's been my go-to. Or sometimes I still react, especially if I'm stressed or unbalanced, I can actually react to my kids' reactions, for example, when they're angry, and I try to fix it. Because now, when I, work so much with myself, I have so many good tools. So I want to help my children, but by doing it, I'm trying to fix them, and I'm sending a signal to them that they are not enough, which I absolutely don't want to do. So, and then I get this feeling of guilt and shame because I know what I've done, and then I'm trying to numb it again. So these days I can be in a cycle, but other days, when I am more aware, I try to sit with it. Just try to sit with it, because I know it will pass. It's uncomfortable, but it will pass, and try to listen what those feelings are trying to tell me. But it's been a long journey, and for many, many years, I totally didn't listen to it, and I was trying to avoid discomfort at any cost. Since I was little, I remember I wanted to learn from older people, elder people, because I thought that if I learn from their mistakes, I will not have to make my own mistakes. And that's what I was trying to do, because I was like old soul since I was little. So I was trying to do that the whole life. And then when I got burned out the first time, I kind of got hit like a train. It's like, oh, it doesn't work like that. I need to learn from my mistakes. So yes, it's been as I've always said in all the talks, it's been a journey. So it depends on where I am that day, and mostly, hopefully, I'm more aware now, and I'm trying to sit with discomfort as often as I can. So.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you for starting us off. And just wanted to say, Amanda, it's beautiful to look at your background, the sun, the blue sky when it comes in as blue. So yes, welcome.
Yes, thank you. It's great to be here. Just for anybody who's tuning in, the Wi-Fi where I am in Mexico is not amazing, so I apologize if there is background noise. I'm at a cafe and I'm on a road, so fingers crossed it's okay. But here I am because it's not working at my hotel. But we get lovely palm trees. So yeah, just to pick up on what Diana was saying, I totally resonate with everything she was saying as well. And it is a journey, it's a process. And I think, like that last thing that she was saying, the number one thing is awareness. And the truth is, so many of us go through life completely unaware that we are numbing, completely unaware that we are squashing and repressing all these uncomfortable feelings. So I want to bring that up too, and make that really, really clear, because I had no clue that this is what I was doing for the vast majority of my life. I had no idea that my behaviors and the way that I handled emotion was really unhealthy. And it was a way to protect myself. It's a response that I learned when I was really little as a self-protective mechanism, but it ultimately manifested in burnout and cancer. I mean, cancer is a perfect storm, but it really took me hitting rock bottom to really start to dig deep and examine what isn't working for me, because disease happens when something isn't working. It doesn't happen in a perfectly healthy human being. And most of us are conditioned to not be comfortable with emotions, at least in Western society, and industrialized society. And there's so many different ways that people numb, but there's this focus on materialism which takes us outside of ourselves. It's very externalized, our society. So we're focused on how we look to other people, and we're not so concerned with how we're feeling inside. It's all external. It's like, what bag do I have? What sneakers do I have? What does my life look like on Instagram or whatever? And I'm not saying I'm perfect in this way either. I like my nice things and whatever. I love to travel. I love sharing the good stuff. But this is very much balanced out in my personal reality now, with me doing that deeper shadow work, with me actually sitting with the discomfort. And that is actually how things have really shifted and transformed for me. Until I started doing this, it was all stuck and I kept repeating the same patterns, and I would get frustrated and start crying and be like, why isn't it working? It's because I was ignoring, or, unconsciously ignoring and repressing and, avoiding all this stuff that was super uncomfortable to look at. And the truth of it is, yes, it's uncomfortable when it comes up. But if you actually allow the emotion to pass through, it actually doesn't take that long to cry it out. It doesn't take that long for the anger to pass. We're talking a matter of 90 seconds, 2 minutes. Maybe you're going to dwell in it a little bit, but for that really deep, raw emotion to come up, this is actually kind of studied. It's kind of an accepted thing that you really only process it for a matter of a few minutes. And I'm not saying you're happy-go-lucky after 2 minutes. I'm not saying that, but the really deep, raw pain doesn't last that long once you allow it to come up to the surface. And it's going to take some more processing in multiple different ways. It's not a one and done process either. I want to be clear about that. There's layers. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, because this is a learned pattern. This has happened to us over and over again. The traumas have repeated. And there's a couple cars. And we have been stuck in the same spin cycle, repeating the same pattern. So we've been hurt in the same ways over and over, repressing the same kind of pain over and over. So it is an onion that we keep peeling back over and over. And I'm still very much in my process. But yeah, numbing can look like so many different things too. Over exercising, eating healthy, being over controlling with your food, and the opposite, overeating, eating too many sweets. It really depends on the individual, but we're in essence controlling. We're controlling our reality and not allowing ourselves to be. And it's this very doing state. The busy, busy, busy is a way of numbing. And that's a really, we think of like substances and, alcohol, medication, weed, drugs, things like this. That's how we typically think of numbing, but it manifests in so many different ways that it can become completely unconscious. Shopping, that's maybe kind of a more accepted one, but yeah, the busy, 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 the running from that appointment to the next, like scheduling everything into the calendar. It's like filling your life so much that you can't feel, that you can't just be, because if you just allow yourself to be, the stuff might come up, and that's not fun. That's how we subconsciously see it. So shopping, food, even if it's healthy eating, over exercising, avoiding social interaction, being an introvert, avoiding dating, not laughing, just not, that's kind of a sign. It's not really a manifestation, but it's a symptom. Kind of going through life more robotically, and there's so many ways that it can look like.
One thing I'm hearing also is like there is not a, like when you were like making all these things that people do throughout the day, right? I feel like they don't even give enough space to feel.
Exactly.
What you're doing, what you're actually saying by adding on, because like that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to avoid to feel anything.
Yeah. Thank you that's exactly what I was trying to say. And you said it much more eloquent and simply. I still haven't had coffee or anything. Morning, right? But exactly, we're not allowing ourselves the space to feel. So that is how we can go through life completely numb and completely unaware that we are numb, and there may be some degree of awareness, but for the vast majority, we don't even realize this is what we're doing most of the time. We might have an uncomfortable thing and say, like a big situation come up, and then we avoid it, and we might be a little bit more aware of that. But usually we're totally unaware. And for me personally, just to wrap it up, like I remember when I was super young, I got messages that it was not okay to express, that it was unsafe, that it was not accepted to be super emotional, to be it was bad to cry, it was bad to be loud, it was that going back to these old adages, like children should be seen and not heard, that's not exactly how it was all the time in my family, but these things trickle down. And, I remember my parents saying that half jokingly when I was really little. And obviously, like, I kept that one too. And I went through school not saying a damn word in class. My teachers would always write on my report cards, and Amanda needs to speak up more in class. I would get straight A's. Amanda needs to speak up more in class. Amanda needs to speak up more in class. From primary school all the way through high school. This did not end. And now I can talk, and you can hardly get me to shut up. But like, that was my pattern. I was so shy, so painfully shy when it came to guys in particular. I would have crushes and just run away. So it really manifested in many different layers of my life. And when it came to professional situations, I started to gain more confidence as I went through college and started traveling and went to grad school. However, like public speaking and speaking up in a meeting or something, my heart would pound like crazy if we had to go around. And if I actually wanted to say something, often it would come out almost too forceful because I didn't know how to manage the energy. I wasn't so grounded in myself. And just one last thing before I forget, triggers. So we can sometimes numbing, like if we numb too much, it can actually explode out of us at a certain point if we're triggered. So that's another sign that we are in a pattern of numbing and we may not be aware of it, because it definitely, if we repress it too much, it's like a volcano erupting. So I just wanted to add that in before I pause and allow others to chime in.
Well, thank you, Amanda. I mean, we know that your shares are always very, very influential and impactful because of the intensity that you experience and also really go deeper below the surface. And so, I appreciate everything that you said, because yes, I mean, one thing that came up for me is because in the training that I'm in this month, we're talking about trauma. And so diseases, as we talked last week, stem a lot of times from traumatic experiences, not only from our own, but also from our ancestors, right? I know, and you talked a lot about that. And one, the way they kind of said how it arises is like trauma arises in a situation where the nervous system is overwhelmed and our normal coping strategies don't work anymore. And so this is kind of like signs on knowing when does trauma shows up, which could be a sign for us to really start creating more space around our schedules, creating more self-care, as Swati has done for herself today, and to allow this to happen, right? And I just got her email with a beautiful poem that she shared with us. So I was a little bit like organizing it as I'm copy pasting it into a document so I can read it to you all. And so, yeah, as I mentioned, we are 3 panelists today. One is just not visible here. That doesn't mean that they should not be acknowledged for all their sharing. And we know from last week and from all the other weeks that she's been here with us, she always shares deeply from her heart and is really going deep and make sure that we all get to that place and open up more. And so here I am very honored to read her poem to you. And it starts by this. People pleasing and numbing around disease. The eyes are wet, the heart is open. With a smile on my lips, I whisper, I will try to make it better next time. Have you been in a situation like this? Postpartum psychosis was not just an episode for me. It led to a diagnosis of imbalances happening in my mind and body. The meds to treat bipolar depression also led to a metabolic disorder. I am constantly body shamed for the way I appear because I am double my size now. However, my efforts are unseen backstage. I eat healthy, I exercise regularly, I sleep well, early to bed, early to rise. So I wonder, why does this pass through people? This judgment mostly comes from people back home in India and sometimes even my family. Unfortunately, mental health cannot be measured or gauged, and it's often overlooked as bad habits or nature of that person. I wish they knew of my daily struggles, how I tried to make each minute count, how I tried to be happy. The only way out is to educate and build awareness around the disease and personal experience. Sometimes it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable and to know you will be stepped on. But to me, it's important to do that because acceptance is not a sign of weakness, rather a lot of strength. So when you spy a leech ready to suck your blood from your finger without overacting, but your whole hand out, I wish I could be present on the panel today, but I need a self-care day off. Special thanks to Raditya and other panelists for being open and honest for the discussion. Please feel free to reach me at Heartfelt Ayurveda on Instagram. Love and strength, Swati. So it is my honor to read this. It definitely causes emotional upbringing. I'm sure I'm not the only one. And it is just to show that there is so much more in us than what we see. The awareness that we're having is only what we know. We don't know what other people are going through. So we have to step away from judgment. We have to step away from thinking we know who and what other people are. It makes me realize, reading her poem, that we are vulnerable beings. And just reading it from her words lets me see how much she opened up in this group, in these panels with us, and really want to make a difference in the world today. And I know that these panels are only the beginning of us sharing who we truly are and what else there is for people to know, not only about us, but about the things people are not looking at. And like Amanda said earlier, that we are unaware. Even if we're aware, there is many things we're unaware of. And by bringing more space, by bringing more awareness, I will be sharing this poem underneath these recordings because this is truly beautiful. Thank you so much, Swati. And please, anyone on the panelists, share if you have. Yes, please, Diana.
Oh, so thank you. Thank you, Amanda, for sharing. I totally agree with everything you said. And thank you, Swati, for such a beautiful poem. And I hear you. Sorry, I feel your pain because I've been there and I know how hard it is. And also what we were talking about before, like, is this guilt and shame for, having these feelings and thinking that if you say these things, actually people who you care about will judge you. It's so painful, but it's actually holding us then back and making us even more sick, as we talked last time. That's what happened to me. And I wanted to go back to this actually about numbing and people pleasing, because during my whole life, I've been loved by my parents. They've been beautiful, but I grew up in Soviet Union where you were supposed to adapt. You were not supposed to speak honestly about things. We hid that we celebrated Christmas. We didn't dare to talk in our living room too loud about some specific topics because we were afraid that our neighbors might be spies. We lived in such uncertain times, and it just went through my body. And I know once I wrote an article in Sweden and I criticized the Swedish Prime Minister, and instead that my parents would be happy for me that I spoke out and said that we all are alike, and Lithuanians who they were afraid of will come after EU will open the doors. My parents were just like, are you sure it's a good thing? You should be careful. You shouldn't talk that loud about these things. Maybe they will capture you and put you to jail and stuff like that, because it was their background where I was from. While here in Sweden, I was feeling really free, and I knew that they will never do things like that. But it showed how much my parents as well had to adapt. And this fear went through to me unconsciously. And even though I thought I was free to say things, I wasn't really. I was holding myself back. And in a school, in Lithuania, when I was in school, I was bullied because I felt different and I was studying, and I was bullied. So I closed off even more inside myself. So when I came to Sweden and I finally found friends in school, and I found freedom and so on, I still adapted. I wanted to have friends. So I adapted to my surroundings all the time. And I was people pleasing because it gave me friends. You know, I was suddenly, from being bullied, I was suddenly popular and I had friends, and so I adapted so much through my life and through my career, especially as well, which was quite male dominant, that I totally lost myself. I lost touch with who I was. So at the end, I actually hated myself so deeply that I sometimes didn't want to live. And it's hard to admit that. And I was so exhausted. So yes, I numbed, and I also worked. I remember I was a kind of a workaholic as well. It was also a way for me to numb. And and sometimes the TV was my numbing, binge watched Netflix, or just, as I said, surfing things because I was so curious. I was just surfing, but it was also keeping myself busy, as you, Amanda, said, just not to feel. So I'm just so grateful that we are talking about this and that we are all here and sharing, and it's worth so much. And I hope that people who are listening, that it helps someone to open up, because carrying it inside, it will make you sick.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you brought it to the point while we're doing it, and I love how you connected the numbing to people pleasing, because most of the time when we are numbing, it's because of expectations on the outside world, trying to fit in, trying to make sense on how should we be for other people to accept us, when in fact we have to be okay with who we are. And then the right people will come, because if we're pleasing people, there might not be the people that you want to have around you. So I think there is lots to say that once you get more connected, once you create that space, once you become aware that you're trying to avoid to feel, to avoid interaction, if you avoid relationship that might be uncomfortable, because even if you're with your, like you talked about, right, Diana, about family and children and, close friends, and, have a community of people, we will get into conflict. We will have things that will come up, but we can't just step away and say like, oh, okay, I'm not going to speak my truth to avoid having conflict. And I think that's just an assumption, because I'm not that way. I'm totally the opposite. Like I go right into, like, if I don't like something, I'll tell you. You will always know. If I have a problem, I will say it. I just have to still practice how to say it, which I learned yesterday, that this is really a challenge for me to share what I think without stepping over the boundaries of other people's experiences. And I think this is if I hear other people speak sometimes, that they have the opposite difficulty. They don't want to say because they want to please. And I had this actually with my brother, right? I just found out about a year and a half ago how he did never want to share anything with me because he was afraid of my sharing. He was afraid. So he was pleasing me to make me happy. But one thing I've learned from that experience is that it doesn't make anyone happier. What it does, it creates a dysfunctional relationship with the people around you, because people will then adjust themselves and they're not themselves. And so what we're doing in this room, what we're trying to bring to your awareness is that you have to find who you are. We have to learn how to communicate it in a safe way, in a way that we're not pleasing other people anymore, but to speak up and see what are we missing, what do we needing, how we're feeling, and what we are looking for to get to connect again. So I'm sure Amanda has a few things here that were coming up. We're having so many things. We had Swati's poem. We had Diana sharing deeply about what her relationship about judgments were and people pleasing, and connected us right into, like, from numbing into people pleasing. So Amanda, please.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so much gold has been shared in the last 5-10 minutes. So yeah, first, thank you, Swati. Thank you, Diana, for being so raw and vulnerable. And this is what the world needs more of, people sharing their vulnerability and being raw and making it okay to put this stuff out. Because I think one of the biggest pandemic that's happening is pandemic of fear and the pandemic of suffering in silence and suffering alone and feeling isolated. It all goes hand in hand the way I see it, but these are the biggest issues that we are actually grappling with. And fear keeps you in, it puts your body in a stress state, it suppresses your immune system. So it actually is a really tangible issue when we're talking about other types of illnesses that might be going around. Not removing fear, but not staying in a state of fear and suffering. That is what's going to allow us to feel empowered. That is what's going to allow us to actually heal when we are sick. So it's really diving deep as we've been talking and figuring out what is the root, what is the source of all this suffering. And so much of it is this trauma and the emotional stuff that we suffer in silence with, that we carry with us our whole lives. And Swati, in her poem, she said something about the only way out. The only way out is through. The only way out is to actually confront it, is to go through the heart of darkness, to go through the dark night of the soul. And it doesn't have to last forever. As we were saying, once you actually enter into the process, it actually doesn't take as long as we think it will. We won't stay there forever. We won't dwell there forever as long as we keep going and keep taking steps forward and not avoiding. The avoiding is what keeps us in these states of suffering. And yeah, and to also touch on what she was saying about judgment. I think judgment, both from others and of ourselves, is a huge issue. Another epidemic, I suppose you could say. We are constantly judging ourselves, which keeps us in a state of shame. We're constantly feeling like we're being judged. And once we realize also that people's reactions toward us, that's more of a reflection of them than it is of us, but we always take it so personally. Once you can see that that other person is suffering too because they were conditioned in their own way, and often the bullies are experiencing deep pain, the only way they know how to feel better is to make somebody else feel less. To talk about, Diana, what you went through when you were younger. So everybody is suffering in their own way, and we don't recognize this. We see the other as wrong. We feel like we're the victim. So many layers of things that are happening that are keeping us disempowered, that are keeping us in a state where dis-ease can take hold. And it just perpetuates these cycles through the line until we choose to change the pattern, until we choose to actually face these demons that lie within, if you will. And that, again, to bring it full circle, requires this awareness in the first place. And I think that's what's happening. That's kind of what's happening in the world now, in my opinion, is that all of this stuff, all the stuff that's been hidden in the darkness and the shadows, are coming to the surface. The darkness is not bad. The darkness is not evil. The shadows are not bad. The shadows themselves are not evil. It's what lies lurking in them that we avoid is what is causing all the pain and suffering in humanity. And Diana, to touch on what you were saying as well, you started to, hate yourself, I think is kind of in essence what you were saying. I really resonated with that so much, because I think that's what happens over time with the people pleasing, the numbing, and all of this is we start to separate from our core essence. We separate from ourselves within, and we become scattered. And our soul is like in different pieces at that point. And, we're that person for that situation, that person for that situation. And we forget who we really are. And I think most emotional pain, which results in physical pain, depression, is actually spiritual depression. It's spiritual misalignment, because we have lost sight of the truth of who we really are, and lost sight of, the truth of how powerful we are and how life should be and all that. I say should with quotation marks, but and this whole idea of people pleasing, as you were saying, Raditya, as well, it creates separation. This idea of separation kept coming up, both within and between our loved ones, separation in relationships. The more separate we feel, the more pain we experience. The more separate we feel within ourselves and between people in our lives, the more pain that arises. So, sorry, somebody's parking their motorcycle right now.
It's all good.
So I feel so. What my journey has really been about has been integration and coming back into a space of wholeness. My program, I call it Healing Back to Wholeness, and it's really about coming back into yourself and healing all the fractured pieces, the wounds within. And it's a journey. Like I said, it's peeling back the layers of the onion over and over, but then we get back into the core of who we really are and the truth of our existence. And it's all love at the end of the day, and separation is the opposite of love. So it's about coming back into this truth and healing. And I know I got a little bit meta there and esoteric. I hope that makes sense.
Well, what is great about your share right now is really bringing it all together. I mean, before I get into actually your conclusion, I'm going to share my side of what you both have shared together about hating yourself and being bullied. I mean, Amanda didn't talk about the bullying part, but Diana touched on it. And so I was the bullier, I was the one that still, even though I did that, I was hating myself in some other kind of way. And I was going through that and wanted to lose, give up my life at an early age. And so it was really to the question of that lack of love, right? And so it really is interesting how you brought this together, Amanda, to just say, like, it's everything is love. It's the lack of it. It's the missing of it, not knowing how to get it, not knowing how to want it. There is this people pleasing coming in because we want their love so badly. So let me just be that what they want me to be, when in fact, they won't love you more if you are what they are thinking you are. What I really truly think is the challenge of all this is that it takes two. Like, I'm not the only one that can do the work. The other person has to do the work as well, because only then can we see each other in that vulnerable place, because otherwise that judgment will come up. Otherwise, we will be, like you said, Amanda, like that's exactly how I felt, right? It's like they were bringing up opinions about something that I've done or things that I do. It was like, and I felt like attacked. I felt like, oh my God, like what did I do? When in fact, and you brought it to the point, and many people, luckily I had good people in my corner that was bringing this. It was like, this is not yours. This is not you. They might do their own thing. And it's difficult. It's so difficult to see that. And it's difficult, especially if you don't have enough people in your corner that can reflect that back to you. And in the world that we're living in, where fear is being promoted, where the hate is being supported, and where everything that makes us actually hurt more, that gets us away from vulnerability, that makes us think we're weak, as Swati was talking about, right? It really makes us lose the connection. And we forget that all we want is love. It really is. I mean, as esoteric as you want to get, Amanda, you know, I mean, that's what it ends up being. I mean, this is why I do and love about mindfulness, is because mindfulness allows us to have space for everything. There is no better or worse. There is no good or bad. There is no right or wrong. It's just a question of how do we welcome all these different experiences that we're having, recognizing who are we speaking to and where are we speaking from, is to understand what space are we in. And I think this is what I learned from this panel discussion today, is that journey that we're in is to find out what space am I in, where have I been numbing myself, where have I been pleasing myself, or where, which is in my case, where have I made other people please me? Because I think it is much easier to talk about being bullied. It's much easier to, I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's like, it's me to speak up. It's like I was the hater. I'm the one that, you know, was doing these things. Like, that's like people who are killing other people. It's difficult to bring kindness and compassion to them because they are doing something, hurting other people, right? And so I think when we are getting hurt, we find spaces for that. And I mean, I don't want to like diminish the pain we're going through, but what I also realize is, like, when we get into depression, when we're getting into diseases, mental diseases, is that there is no worse or better. And so that's kind of where I want to go to, is like we have these impressions of something. And so before I get into the wrong impression, I want to have you share your sides on what I've been just saying. Yes, please.
I just wanted to say that what I learned from my journey is actually, even though we are two persons, for example, talking to each other, and one gets triggered or says something and something else has triggered me, when I learned to love myself and give that love to myself, then I was not as triggered by the other people, actually. So that love that I was seeking from others, no one can give it me. That's what I realized. I need to give it to myself. And when I gave it to myself, then I could see the other ones, the bullies or the other people who are criticizing me, more with compassion. You know, I started to see them as they are hurting too, and understand why they are doing it. And then I started to see them, or if I still got triggered, that's what I was talking all the time. I started to see them as my mirrors, so that they show me what is triggered in me, so I can go with curiosity deeper inside me and see, why am I triggered? And just without guilt or shame, or, you know, just try to understand what is it, just and be compassionate both with myself and with that other person. And it really helped me. So actually I kind of released the expectations that everyone else will love me, or, you know, or expect them to love me. I just released it. I know that the most important thing is me. And when I love myself, and for who I actually truly am, and not the one I wanted to be, then I think the ones who should love me will love me, or should, who want to love me will love me, whatever.
Yes, exactly. I think that's, you bring it to the point, and I'm sure Amanda will share something about self-love. So Amanda, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Diana. That was beautiful and so perfect. It really is the truth. You know, conflict does arise between two people. However, I also feel that, you know, when you are in a space of doing the work, when you are when you feel worthy of you know, the truth that all is love and that you can give it to yourself, you're not as triggered, and you're able to come from a space of compassion and forgiveness for the other. And forgiveness is, I've heard some things about forgiveness that it's like not so high vibe because it's kind of condescending energy, and I disagree. I think forgiveness comes from seeing the other in yourself as well, and forgiving yourself, forgiving the other, I think it's actually a very uniting, equalizing force. I think that's coming still from a wounded space to see it as something maybe not good. I saw some spiritual teachers say that. I was like, I called them out in the comments. I was like, no. Yeah, so I just basically, to reiterate what you were saying, once you have done the work and are really grounded and accepting of yourself, it's really a lot harder to be triggered. And then when you are triggered, because the work is ongoing, we're still humans. You can take a step back and reflect rather than react in the moment and say, oh, what is this bringing up in me? And it's interesting. And I'm not saying those other people are perfect and that they haven't done any wrong. Of course not. We've all been both victim and victimizer. So again, to see the other in self and to see the self in other is really, really important. And also what I will say is the more work that I have done, even if the person who, there have been people in my life who've actually straight up said, well, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to change. Our relationship has improved because I've done the work and the energy has shifted. And I think me coming from more of a space of compassion and love and not being triggered and reactive, it starts to fall away, and the other person, maybe not even consciously so much, but they start showing up in a different way. So us doing the work ourselves can actually really transform relationships as well. Ideal case scenario, yes, everybody shows up. But I will say that sometimes we just have to be the leader, and then maybe they'll get curious. Maybe they never will. But the energy, I've heard this story from a lot of people as well, especially with parents, a little bit more fixated when they're, the older we get, those patterns are more and more ingrained. So it can still transform. There is still a lot of hope. I would just want to say that because I've had that experience. So it's all love. Yes. I guess we'll just wrap it up with that.
We're coming back to what we talked a lot about last week, which is energy. And yes, obviously, when I change, you change. When I make efforts in the right direction, then the direction is changing. And so, yes, that is totally true. I was thinking about, immediate relationships. And so if you're like in a partner relationship, right, and it's much more energy zapping sometimes. Oh, yeah. When you're doing all the work and you don't see anything happening on the other side, or also you just don't see that the work that they're doing is happening. So I think there is many different aspects of it. So I was just talking about what I saw, like immediate, in my surroundings, but I totally agree with you both that I have to love myself. I have to do the work on my own end. And yet it's nice to have some confirmation sometimes from the outside world that the work is working. So yes, the energy is all that. And there is, one thing why I just honor these panel discussions so much is that I learned so much. I mean, some of you might have seen my video last week where I really was super, super grateful after last week's panel discussion. And I'm just really learning so much. And the only way we can learn is when we share. The only way we can make changes when we know we did something that wasn't comfortable or that wasn't the right thing, right? And so this is what I'm learning. I'm sharing things that just pop in my head and I'm saying them out loud, right? And that might work up some feathers here, right? Or make some crazy waves I've been talking about, right? And so what it is for me to just realize we all make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. We're not here on this earth to be perfectionists and not make any mistakes. We are here to have conversations. We are here to share from the heart with our hearts, as we call these sessions. And so we connect to one another, because when we share from our hearts, when we know that my intentions are good, we will find out what the impact is once that other person is sharing with us. So I guess when we are changing. We're not asking, we're having them change, no matter if they want to or not. What I do realize is that we need the feedback from the other people to shift into the right direction. So I think communication is certainly key in this last bit. And so we just want to make sure that these connections, what we're creating here is for you to take away, that you open up to the people that are close to you, people that you feel comfortable with, that you want to open up to, that all these demons, as we talked about, these shadows, as we mentioned them, especially Amanda has a lot of knowledge around that. And so if you need more content around this, please, connect with her. And so what I've really noticed is that we have lots of those shadows. We have lots of those, things that demons that make us say and do things that are not really helpful. And so when they're not helpful, the only way out is with our voices, with conversations, with finding the right people. So I wanted to make sure we all get our last words out and last thoughts about today's session, about numbing, about people-pleasing judgment, and the conclusion of just love, self-love, and the love for others in a compassionate way. So Amanda and Diana, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Oh gosh, how do we recap all of that? I guess, yeah, just awareness is the first step. And recognizing and having the courage, this takes a lot of courage. It's actually the hardest work that we can do. Having the courage to recognize that you're not really in a space of feeling like your best, that itself takes a lot of courage, and that there is some work that you can do perhaps, and that you're not feeling okay, and that actually there's a lot of shit that you've gone through that doesn't feel good, and that maybe you're stuck, and that maybe your life doesn't look amazing, and there's hope on the other side. So it takes a lot of courage to go through that. So I want to put that out there, that first, give yourself a lot of compassion and grace, and a lot of acknowledgement for even having the courage to take that first step and bring awareness to your situation. And then to say that there's so much support out there to help you go through this process. And the biggest thing is that people feel like they have to do this alone. They feel alone in the process, and that is so not the case. There are so much support out there for all of us, because there's so many people like us, all of us here, who have been going through it and doing the work, and it's been a journey. And I've done a lot of it alone, and most of it I haven't done alone. The most transformative stuff I have not done alone. So I just want to say you are not alone, and there is so much love and support out there for you. And it all comes back to love. So self-love, self-care. What can you do in this moment before you know what to do next? Give yourself space, give yourself love, give yourself some compassion. So I will end it there for now, and pass it on.
Thank you. So beautifully said. Everything you said today, Amanda, was so beautiful. So beautifully put. I'm just so inspired. Yes, because I wanted to say the same thing, self-love, and that you are not alone. Because during my journey as well, even though I had many people who loved me, because I lost myself and I was, pleasing people, I felt so lonely. And that loneliness itself was so heavy. So just knowing that you are not alone, and yes, we are here, and there are so many others who can guide people. And I also, through my journey, had people who guided me and helped me, and communities where you feel safe, where you can share. It's a key. And what I always say also, be patient with yourself. this kindness and compassion, but also patience, because I was also a very impatient person with myself. So just be patient with yourself. Know that it's a life journey, and we will go up and down the whole life, but hopefully we go more, slowly up, because our awareness improves. And this curiosity, for me at least, has been also the key. Even though things happen and you feel this discomfort, try to look at it with curiosity, just see what's underneath that. And also a reminder that we all are enough just because we exist. We don't need to do or prove ourselves to others. Just that realization has been also very important to me in my journey, that we all are enough just because we exist and breathe. So thank you so much for this beautiful talk.
Thank you, Amanda, Diana, for recapping our hour of this conversation. And patience. People like you both who've been going through cancer, depression, burnouts, it took a long time, and it will come back, and you have to go through it again, and we have to welcome it again. And it's something that, for you, just want to talk about the burnouts, and so they can come because if we don't pay attention, if we're unaware, like Amanda also pointed out, it begins with awareness. The sooner we notice the signals coming up, noting what were those signals, we're able to just take a step back. Take that breath, take that time, take that moment to ourselves. And Swati, I know you're here with us, and that self-care you're doing, you're just leading the way. You're leading this conversation by actually showing up exactly like this. There are days where we have to take care of ourselves, where we need to take a moment for ourselves, that we don't need to be out there and sharing with other people. This is the place to do this. And so it is all welcome. And so I appreciate the two of you showing up and sharing so much, and Swati for writing this beautiful poem for us and making us look within. And for me, this has been just such a great learning experience about all the different aspects. We all are so different. Our experiences are so different. What we're going through is very different. Even if we're going through similar experiences, maybe we've all had depression at some point, maybe we all experience burnouts, but they show up differently. We're dealing with them differently. We need to be compassionate with one another, sharing what we're going through, and expand our horizons. So this is what Sharing with Heart is here to do. This is why Mindful Being is creating these circles, these panel discussions, for you to see what is out there and how it can show up in your life, and how much more enriched your life can be. Because I cross my fingers, your life will be long, and it will go long, and you might be 80, you might be 90. So if you're in the midst of your life, you're at 40, you still got half a way to go. So you got lots to go with, lots to learn, lots to discover. And I just saw myself as a little chick this morning, just cracking out of the shell of an egg. And so if that's where you are right now, guess what? The world is beautiful. There is so many things to discover. You feel like a child, be playful, be happy, and just connect with the people around you that make you feel whole. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. This was wonderful. And see you next week for the cooking lesson with Swati Rahatke.